Dear friends, grace, mercy, peace to you from God our Father and the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. We are in campaign season again this summer and fall, with elections only 4 months off. The good news is it'll be over in 4 months. In my bedtime reading, I've been going waist deep into the national election of 2008, and I've already learned more than I ever wanted to know about the strategy of running for president, including how to formulate your message and your identity, and how to position yourself in polls and caucuses and primaries, state by state. Well, all of that made me realize that today's gospel is sort of a campaign, if you would. As Jesus tours the countryside and he gets feedback of what the public opinion is, and he sends campaign workers out ahead of him. I'd almost venture that all those good Christian folks who run for office in this country have read all of this in the Bible very thoroughly, and they learned how to succeed in politics by following Jesus. No. Of course, I know better than that. The difference between the gospel and politics is probably about the same as the distance between the north edge of the Grand Canyon and the south edge. But there's one striking similarity. In his campaign, Jesus runs into resistance. This can be hard for us to take seriously, don't you think? I mean, this can be something that if we've gotten over our resistance to Jesus, then we can understand, but perhaps we still have some of our own. The world around us, my friends, especially here in Los Angeles, seems to be more resistant to the message of Jesus than the rest of the country. I want to take this all apart for us for just a few minutes with you, and I hope it will not only make us sense our faith in Christ a little better, but maybe our mission in Christ. And the first thing that we note in this gospel reading is the resistance is to Jesus as a person. Maybe if he just stayed in his place as the carpenter, it would have been fine. But here we find Jesus is teaching in the synagogue. But with what credentials? I mean, where did he study? What degrees did he earn? What licenses does he have? Where did he go to graduate school? Okay, I'm teasing a little bit, but the public opinion from his neighbors is, who does he think he is? They take him apart and resist him because he's putting on airs. He's being pretentious, as if he were an important scholar from somewhere else. But this is his hometown. And everybody knows his parents, his brothers and his sisters. So they're not impressed. The implication then is, if we know that Jesus is from Mary and Joseph, then he can't be from above. He can't be from heaven or from God, can he? If Mary is his mother, he's just an ordinary guy like everybody else. So we shouldn't listen to him. I kind of can relate to that. As much as we may love our families, sometimes we cringe from our own family connections. When I was, I guess, about 20, I began to feel like that I was somebody socially with my peers. I had found myself a college job, and I became the technical director of the college theater. So I got to design and build the sets for the play productions, and I rigged all the lighting and did that myself. And when the first production of The Fall was over, there was a cast party that night at the director's home. And I was having the time of my life at that party. I was drinking a little bit, and I thought my peers actually noticed me as an interesting guy in my own right who was having fun at this party. And then the phone rang. And the director's wife came to me, and she said, "It's your mother." Oh, my God. "I've been worried sick," she said. "You told me you would be home at 11 o'clock, and it's 12:30. I can't sleep a wink. I almost called the police because I was sure they were going to find you dead on the highway somewhere." Oh my God. I was the only person in that entire party whose mom called to check on it. I was finished. Mom had cut me down to size. So in this campaign, there's no favorite son advantage. People know who Jesus' mom is and his brothers and sisters. And they took umbrage, they took offense at him because they thought Jesus wouldn't have anything to say or present a message as if he was qualified. We know he's family, for Pete's sake. But secondly, we see that this resistance to Jesus is more than just about him as a person or his family, but the message itself caused them to take offense. People rejected it. Was it that radical? Or was it basically that he was putting himself out there? His message came forward with authority that he just shouldn't have claimed. Now, to get this, I think we have to reimagine that world in which wisdom always passed from father to son, generation to generation. There were no formal schools, no degree programs or universities. The synagogue was the study hall, in which the local rabbi, of course, would have taught what his rabbi had taught him. And people would try to understand the Bible that they had in a context where very little ever changed. Hundreds of years could pass without anybody expecting anything to be different. There were no new discoveries or new developments. What mattered, generation after generation, was experience. And the younger generation would sincerely respect and desire to know the wisdom that came from their fathers and their grandfathers. Some of us in this room are old enough to remember the world before Google. Remember that? When our grandfathers and the Encyclopedia Britannica were about the only things that you had to rely on. All that, of course, was years before human knowledge and human experience just exploded with the internet and all of the technology that has come about. Back then, I remember that I deeply respected my pastor, too, probably more than my father. And as I drew closer to the church, I was fascinated with the tradition of the church. I could imagine my way back through time, the generations of Christian thought from the time of Jesus and the first apostles. Teaching the next generation was the only way to preserve what little knowledge there was. And it carried a lot of responsibility to impart wisdom. And as some people in our times are now discovering all over, just having terabytes of information or data, volumes of new stuff to look at and work through at our fingertips doesn't impart any wisdom. It's just information. But when the only knowledge and wisdom available to a primitive society were the things that were passed down, people got suspicious of anything that was new. Anything. Now, we need to stop right there. Stop as if this is the very first time we've given thought to how radical Jesus must have seemed. It's clear from this reading that, and other places in the New Testament, of course, Jesus had a message that was disconnected from the received tradition, from the unquestioned wisdom that came generation to generation. Beginning in Mark's first chapter, he said about the curious crowds then, they were astounded at Jesus' teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, not as their scribes. And they kept asking one another, what is this, a new teaching? And with authority. And in today's reading, we're told that Jesus sent his campaign staff, his disciples ahead of him, and that he gave them authority. Well, I raise all of this because it may reveal something about resistance to the message of Jesus Christ in this 21st century. We think that, we're in a new age, a new information age. We're captivated by instant messaging and tweets and 24/7 live news feeds. And our passion is for the latest thing. We think that people would then be fascinated by this figure of Jesus who broke with tradition and taught new things 2,000 years ago. Somebody who spoke with authority and acted as if he were onto something. How much foresight he had. But we're not as modern or as advanced as we think we are. A few years ago, I bought a book that promised to be fascinating by a supposed well-respected doctor named Andrew Weil, called 8 Weeks to Optimal Health. And his premise in the cover and all that was to promise me everything, the best health I could possibly have if I would just follow his regimen for 8 weeks. And this was a new thing, I thought. But as I read on, he wanted me first to give up all the sugar in my diet, and he wanted me to give up all the meat, and then he wanted me to slurp down this wheatgrass juice and green tea and other concoctions I was supposed to whip up in my kitchen. And I'm not saying that he might not be right about health and all that, but just the smell of grass juice, and I put the book down. And I've never picked it up again. I mean, Dr. Weil already had my bucks for buying the book, but I just didn't have the stomach for wheatgrass juice. It just, no way. So maybe that's an illustration that Jesus just asks too much, and that's the problem. He wants us to change. He wants us to be done with our own egos, with selfishness, and with our possessions. Get rid of them. He sends his assistants out unprepared. He says, don't take anything with you except a walking stick. Expect that you can just trust God to supply everything. He zeroes in on what's demonic in people's lives and in society. He's, here after an awful lot more than just a little garden variety mental illness, the evil spirits of his day. And before he's done, he predicts that he will pay for his message with his life. But he says his followers should be prepared to do the same. And even more, the message of Jesus probes human relationships. He says that not only was divorce really adultery, but even looking at someone with lust was just as bad, and that anger was just like murder. He advocated that we just forgive everybody, everything, hundreds of times, and turn the other cheek to violence, don't resist the evildoer. And he disdained what the Bible of his day taught. He said, you've heard it said, but I say to you, and just countered all of that stuff. I wonder if many of us today are still not really ready to listen to Jesus without some offense or resistance. Christians tend to resist or to filter out what we don't want to hear, or we bargain